Prenatal education is my go-to, and especially with twins, I'm like, you need twin-specific information because we have different challenges than parents of a singleton, and we have, just unique challenges, unique situations that we need to be prepared for.
Hey, Mama Bear. Welcome to the Breastfeeding with Confidence podcast. Do you dream of bonding with your baby through exclusive breastfeeding, but worry about breastfeeding pain or low milk supply? Maybe you're struggling with breastfeeding and no one seems to have any answers. I'm Jamie, doula, international board certified lactation consultant, and mom of 5, and I have been where you are. After working through painful latches, milk supply worries, and postpartum depression, and supporting countless mothers through their breastfeeding journeys for over 8 years, I'm here to tell you breastfeeding doesn't have to be perfect to be positive. Each week, I'll share breastfeeding tips to help you prevent and overcome unexpected breastfeeding challenges so you can actually enjoy bonding with your baby. If you are ready to shut out the toxic whispers of the world, embrace your God-given intuition, and release your inner fierce mama bear, grab some coffee or your favorite herbal tea and let's dive in. We have Shelly with us here today. Shelly is a twin mom and lactation consultant in Canada, right? What part of Canada are you in?
I'm in Windsor, Ontario, so we're like directly across from Detroit, Michigan.
Okay, so she is here today to talk to us all about breastfeeding your twins because there are a lot of myths, there are a lot of bad advice out there, and there are some secret hacks that I'm sure you'll want to have that she's going to share with you today. So, Shelly, just go ahead and introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, why you do this work.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me, Jamie. So yeah, my name is Shelly. I am a registered nurse for the last 14 years. The last 10 has been working with moms and babies. I've been in IBCLC for 5 years, and I specialize in twins and multiples. I have twins. So my twin boys just turned 7, and I have a little girl who just turned 5. So yeah, busy between mom life and private practice with working mostly with twin families. I feel like so many lactation consultants, we get into this because of our own struggles. And that was my experience. I found out I was pregnant with twins, and I had been working with moms and babies for close to 4 years in public health. So I was seeing, babies from newborn up to toddler age, working with lots of nursing families. And when I found out I was pregnant with twins, all the twin families came to my mind, and all I could remember was all of the feeding journeys that weren't going as planned, all the struggles, all the challenges. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to be good. And, we struggled a lot, but I was able to exclusively nurse my twin boys for 2 years. And during that time, I was like, wow, my experience is not isolated to me with these struggles. And I find a lot of the times, twin families just aren't supported in the way they need to be to achieve their feeding goals. So between having my twins and having my daughter, I got the crazy idea to write the IBCLC exam and thankfully passed on 2 hours of sleep with a very colicky newborn.
I know that feeling. I had to do like a road trip in order to take my exam, and it was wild.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, my first exam was canceled because March 2020, if you know, you know. And I was, 7 months pregnant at the time. And then it was rescheduled for September 2020. So I had a very colicky newborn. But you know what? It all worked out wonderfully, obviously. And it's just been such a joy to work primarily with twin families. And I've had a handful of triplet families as well. And just really helping them to make breastfeeding, pumping manageable and sustainable for their families.
Yeah. So listening to you share that, I was thinking your first breastfeeding journey was with twins. Like mine was with a singleton, and it was hard. I remember we had always wanted twins. I was like, oh, twins would be so cool. And then after we had my son and struggled so much, I was like, thank freaking God we did not have twins. I think I would have died. And so just thinking of how hard breastfeeding can be just as a new mom, for the simple fact that it's something new, and then add another baby to that. Can you talk a little more about the unique challenges that you faced that maybe, you've been helping breastfeeding families? You knew some of the common challenges, but what were some of the unique challenges that maybe you weren't ready for with twins specifically?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I was very fortunate that my twins were born at 37 and 6, which 60% of twins are born premature. So for my twins to be born like just shy of 38 weeks, I was like, oh, okay, this that takes a lot of the challenges that we expect with babies who are premature in the NICU kind of out of our picture for our feeding journey. And they didn't require any NICU time, which was great. I did have a scheduled C-section. So I kind of had in the back of my mind, the typical challenges we face after a C-section, but both of the boys latched right in recovery. And I had this thought, I was like, oh my gosh, we've made it. No, things drastically declined after that.
I always say that good first latch is so great because it shows you it can happen and then everything starts to fall apart. But we look back and say that first latch happened. It can happen. Now we just have to.
Yeah. So what I wasn't prepared for was, we think, oh, they're full term, they're almost 38 weeks. Well, we know that babies who are born late preterm or early term babies, like a 38-week baby feeds very differently than a 40-week baby. And a 38-week-old twin will be different than a 38-week-old singleton. So even though, my twins were 38 weeks or almost 38 weeks, and they were a decent size, they were 6'4" and 6 pounds, 15 ounces.
Wow.
So, yeah, they were good size, although they did have a lot of water weight. So that's where it begins. So when I was admitted to have my C-section, I have very low blood pressure to begin with. So they hooked me up and I'm like 95/60. So they're like, let's put the fluids in. So I got 4 bags of IV fluid before going in for my C-section. And then another 4 before they had done the first cut. And I'm a nurse, so I'm counting all this, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all this go. So my twins, in the first 24 hours, one of them had 12 wet diapers. And so I was like, oh, we're going to have a big weight loss. And, now I always encourage my families, get a 24-hour wait. But this was 7 years ago. And I knew that there would be a higher weight loss, but I didn't think to ask for a 24-hour wait. So, we have, babies peeing lots. They were sleepy, they were jaundiced, and the hospital was really not supportive. They're like, that's really nice that you want to breastfeed, but here's some formula. You need to start supplementing. And I'm like, you haven't even weighed them to see if they've lost anything. They're like, well, you're having twins. You're not going to be able to breastfeed. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm like, can you please bring me a pump? And they left it at the door. I had just had a C-section. I was by myself. I forget, my husband ran home or something. I'm by myself with these 2 babies and the pump's at the door. I'm like, I felt very set up for failure. And the one night nurse and I did not jive. And
surprise.
I know. It was
always, I hate to say that. It's always the night nurses with my moms. They're like, the night nurse. And I'm like, why is it always the night nurse?
She was very adamant. She was kind of like, you need to just give in and supplement because this is not going to happen.
Yeah, if you keep telling me it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. Oh my goodness. All right, sorry. Keep going.
So sure enough, morning of discharge. So in Canada, for your first C-section, you're discharged at 48 hours. And the weekend I had our boys, it was so busy. So my husband was working that morning because we were expecting them to come at 38 and 2. But we had to move my C-section up because I had a severe case of PUPS, which is a whole other fiasco. So my husband was working. I'm like, he doesn't get off till 12. Can you discharge us at 1 instead of 11? And they're like, no, you need to go. So they weigh the babies at 10:20. And the nurse was like, see, told you, one lost 7% and one lost 9%. Sign this paper saying you're going to supplement. And I was just felt so defeated. I slept literally, I think 2 hours combined in that 48 hours. It was time change weekend. The nurses kept coming in at odd times and waking us up. And anyway, so it was kind of a disaster. So I went home feeling so defeated already. And the lactation consultants that I had talked to in my work were like, oh yeah, you can breastfeed twins. But the whole long-winded part of this whole thing is my particular challenge was I wasn't prepared for the challenges that came with nursing and breastfeeding babies who aren't quite full term. So I was a first-time mom with a C-section. My milk transition was definitely delayed a bit. I didn't know that I should have been pumping. And then once I did start pumping, it was with a 24 millimeter flange. So again, a whole other fiasco, and it just was really challenging. So I was like why are they having so much trouble latching? Why are they so sleepy? I wasn't prepared for feeding, 37 and 6 babies. So long story short, we had a good 4 weeks of triple feeding.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, 4 weeks of triple feeding. And looking back, it didn't need to be that long, but I didn't really have the guidance of, okay, you can start tapering back. So I was pumping so much, triple feeding. I ended up pumping myself way, way into an oversupply. I had a horrible oversupply at that point, and there just wasn't any guidance. I was trying to figure it out on my own at the time without having that experience working with that population. And yeah, it was really, really tough. And then throw in the sleep deprivation and all that. It was really challenging, but I'm thankful for it because looking back, I'm like, okay, I know where things could have been changed and I do better for my clients. I prepare them and I have, realistic expectations in place for them. And we have expectations in place for, like we're not triple feeding for a month or longer on end. And we're not pumping with gigantic flanges and wondering why we're not getting any milk. And so that for me in particular with my twins, I just was not prepared for that challenge of them not quite feeding like full term babies. And truly, once they hit that 40-week gestation mark, it's like something snapped and they were just latching better. And yeah, things were a lot better. And side note too, they did have oral restrictions that I asked like 4 different professionals about. They're all like, no, no. And now we have 7-year-olds who, have airway issues and we're going to need expansion and tie releases and all that fun stuff.
Your story is so inspiring and I'm so grateful you're sharing it, but it's so frustrating to hear because these are really the stories we hear every single day, and not even just with twins, with singletons too. It's just like you had the same thing, just double, right? And it's like every single day, could have simple things, just understanding how fluids impact weight loss can prevent that early supplementation that can turn into delayed onset of milk. It's frustrating to hear that people want to tell you that because you're having twins, then you're just doomed from the start. And then they start reiterating all the myths that they're telling singleton moms. And it's like, there's really no difference in what you people are telling. Like there are differences in twins, obviously, but the bad advice is still the same bad advice. And they're setting moms up for failure either way. And it's frustrating to hear that. It's just frustrating to hear. So go ahead and tell me what your go-to tips are for moms who are, expecting twins. You said you have to set them up with realistic expectations. What are maybe the first 2 things that you tell them if you take nothing away from your prenatals together? If they take nothing else away, what are the 2 things that you want them to remember and keep telling themselves when it's challenging in those early days?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. So twins or not, and I know you'll be in agreement with me, like prenatal education and support is just like, I recommend that highly to everyone. And I don't care if it's your first baby or your 5th, but especially for your first, especially with twins, prenatal education is a must. And like you said, the bad myths are there with twins and singletons, like the misinformation. And I find prenatal education can dispel so much of that and gives families the tools to realize like what are red flags and like when do we need to reach out for help. Because when we believe that breastfeeding is supposed to hurt for X number of days or weeks or months, we just keep pushing through. Or when we believe that we can't make a full milk supply for twins, we don't reach out when we're only producing a quarter or a half because we just think that's normal. So yeah, prenatal education is my always like go-to, and especially with twins, I'm like, you need twin specific information because we have different challenges than parents of a singleton. And we have, just unique challenges, unique situations that we need to be prepared for. So that's always my number 1. My number 2 is to know your why. Why is breastfeeding or providing breast milk important to you and you alone? Because when it's 3:00 in the morning and you're juggling 2 babies who aren't latching, or you're having trouble getting them back down, or you're pumping and you're just feeling overwhelmed, like knowing your why is going to keep you going. And it has to be your reason. If you're breastfeeding or pumping because your partner wants you to, or your mom or your mother-in-law or your sister, that's not going to get you through, because it's like, why am I doing this? So know why it's important to you, and your reasons, it doesn't matter what it is, but just know why it's important to you, because when things get tough, and they will, you need to remind yourself of why you're doing this. I share with my clients, and I've shared this on Instagram before, every single feed for those first 6 weeks was such a mental thing for me. I'm like, okay, here we go. This is why I'm doing this. I would remind myself of my personal reasons, because it was hard. It was really hard, but I would do it all over again in a heartbeat, because it was 1000% worth it. And once we got through those initial roadblocks and challenges, it was so easy. Like, so it was easy, and I shouldn't say easy, it was manageable. Like, babies aren't easy.
No, I know what you mean. It's like I tell people breastfeeding was really, really hard for me at the beginning. But once we got through that, it became the most convenient thing in the world. Yeah, that was my why. I was like, I don't want to take bottles everywhere with me, because I remember leaving the house when my brother, I'm 8 years older than my brother. I remember we would leave the house for like a full day out. My mom would be like, and we'd have to turn around. And like, I'm forgetful. That was my big thing. Of all the reasons, I had a million reasons. That was the one that I was like, I can't forget my boobs. They're attached to me.
Okay, I hear you on that. And I say this in my online twin breastfeeding course. I say this in my prenatals. I've said this on Instagram. It wasn't my main reason, but one reason for me is I'm honestly like a little, I don't know if I should say lazy, but I hate doing dishes. Dishes is one of my worst chores. Hate doing them. And the thought of washing like 16 plus bottles a day, and the pump parts and everything, like, was very overwhelming for me. And I'm like, I know I would function much better if I just had to nurse a baby, rather, like, the mental load that housework brings for me. I have a lot of executive functioning challenges. So that was one of my reasons. And I'm like, people can think that's silly, but for me, that was valid. I do not like washing dishes.
It is valid. And anybody listening, I want you to hear that our reasons probably sound so superficial at the end of the day, but that's okay, because you don't owe anybody an explanation on your reasons. Your reasons are your reasons, and they don't have to be good enough for anybody but you.
Yep.
So let me ask you a question about tandem feeding versus not tandem feeding, because I know there can be so much I don't know, controversy. I don't know if controversy is the word, but that's the one we'll use, about whether or not you should tandem feed, when you should start tandem feeding. I have not worked with a ton of twins. I have found that the ones I have worked with, when they are struggling, my kind of go-to approach is, let's get each baby feeding really well individually and then try tandem feeding. But I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yes. So I'm in agreement with you. And I try never to put blanket statements, because there's always, as you know, as like nuance, but for the vast majority of twin families, I recommend feeding each baby individually in the beginning. And I know it's hard, but we want to make sure each baby is latching and transferring effectively before we move on to the learned skill of tandem breastfeeding, because especially as newborns, they're so little, they require a lot of support. It can be really hard to make sure that both babies are latching and feeding effectively. And as we know, in the lactation world, there's kind of that term, the great pretenders, with babies who are like 37 weeks or so, because they look like full-term babies. Maybe they're not as like filled out, but they can look like they're nursing, but they're not transferring effectively. And I've had, unfortunately, so many moms who, were encouraged to tandem from the get-go, and it looks like the babies were maybe nursing, but they weren't transferring well, and they weren't gaining well. Mom's milk supply is not increasing because babies aren't emptying the breast. So as challenging as it is, I encourage moms to do individually at first, make sure each baby's latching well and transferring effectively. And then we move on to tandem nursing. Now, that being said, like, you can for sure practice once or twice a day, especially if you have extra sets of hands to help hold babies in place and things like that. But I really find it depends on the babies, specifically like when they were born. Some moms I've had who started tandem nursing fairly early, like in the first couple days, and their babies did beautifully. Most moms, it takes some time to work towards. And then on top of that, I'll say some families that I work with, the moms try tandem nursing and they're like, I don't like it. It's too overstimulating.
Mhm.
It's too much. And they prefer to just feed the babies individually and have that one-on-one time. So I always say there's no right or wrong. Like, you do not have to tandem feed if you have twins, but we for sure want to make sure each baby's nursing well on their
Yeah.
own individually before we
So
integrate
let
together.
me ask you the logistics on that, because I'm sure there's moms listening that are like, okay, so if I feed them individually, do I feed each baby one breast? Do I still feed them both breasts? And then, like, what are the logistics around swapping breasts, feeding them one breast? Do you
Yeah.
start one on the left, let them finish on the right, and then start the second one on the right and finish on the left?
That's such a great question. So typically I say one breast per feed, especially if we're doing individually. So, and we're going to stagger the feeds really close. So say baby A wakes up first. I nurse baby A on the right. We're waking baby B up to go on the left, like immediately after. Sometimes when my families are tandem nursing in the beginning, I'll have them switch nurse. So, baby A is on the right, baby B is on the left, and then we'll switch them and they can each have a turn on the other side. And I find that happens a lot too when families are experiencing cluster feeding in the early days and they're tandem feeding. It's just like switching babies back and forth all day. But I do typically recommend one breast per feed in the beginning for sure, because milk supply tends to be lower. So if we were to give one baby both sides and then the next baby comes along, the breasts likely haven't refilled enough for the second baby to get a good feed.
Yeah, and that's what I figured. That's how I would do it. But I know there's moms listening that want to hear it from you because you are the twin expert. Thank you so much for coming on here today and just sharing your story and so much wisdom. What resources do you have for moms who are expecting twins or who are navigating twins and need extra support? They want to be fully prepared. What does preparation look like from the educational standpoint? I know we talked about that a little bit. Do you do prenatal visits? Do you have a course? Where can they find you? And what can you do for them?
Yeah, thank you for asking. The main place you can find me is on Instagram. My handle is @twinmomguide. In terms of what I offer, I have an online twin breastfeeding course, which I highly recommend moms take in pregnancy. It is lifetime access. You can watch videos as many times as you want. I actually had a mom message me the other day. She's like, I'm watching your videos while I'm being induced. And she got off to a great start. I was so happy for her. But yeah, so online twin breastfeeding course. I practice virtually. So I see twin families all over the place and offer consults from prenatal, postpartum, back to work, weaning, like everything in between. And then I am working on some new free resources. So those will be on Instagram and on my website very soon.
And what is your website?
My website is twinmomguide.com.
Twinmomguide.com. Okay, so if you are having twins or you are navigating twins, go to twinmomguide.com and she has got you covered everything you need. Thank you so much for coming, Shelly. I really appreciate this. If there is one last tidbit that you want to leave moms with, what is your final piece of advice?
That it is possible to breastfeed twins and you can do so with confidence and joy.
I love that.
All right, Mama Bear, that is a wrap for today. If this episode helped you feel a little more confident or a little more prepared for breastfeeding, can I ask you a quick favor? Go ahead and leave me a review. It helps other moms find this podcast and join us in this amazing community of fierce and confident Mama Bears. And hey, if you know a friend who could use some encouragement or real talk about pregnancy, breastfeeding, and all things motherhood, share this episode with her. You've got this, Mama Bear. Trust your instincts, stay fierce, and I'll catch you in the next episode.